Canadians have been rightly shocked and horrified as the details of the botched ArriveCan procurement have been made public. And one aspect that I think seems particularly egregious to people is the charging of commissions by contractors that do very little, if any, work. And I thought this was illustrated best by some communication that came out through the investigation by Bottler, IT company from Montreal. And they describe a phone call with the principal of GC Strategies, where he talks about CBSA essentially rolling out this particular IT product to the rest of the government's departments, and that a 15% commission would be charged by his company, something that he laughed at and said the higher pricing would, quote, suck for Canada. Do you agree that charging those kinds of commissions sucks for Canada?
So let me answer that great question in three different ways. The first piece,
because I have 5 minutes, so really tight.
the first piece is that in normal circumstances, you would want those services to be provided by the public service. There are hundreds of thousands of public servants who work very hard and invest their talents and their energy every day to make a difference for Canada, and you would want that expertise and those efforts of the public service to be used. The second thing is that if that's not the case, it either is because there is no ability to do that, and in a complex world, which is becoming complex every day, there are instances in which it's not possible for the public service to answer all of those needs, or it might be that it's too urgent to do so. It would take too little time to do that, as was the case in COVID-19. Now, the third piece, I would say, is that when that is needed, when staff augmentation or contracting is needed for Canadian safety and health to be protected, as was the case in COVID-19, that has to be done following rules. These rules were very clear during COVID-19. Unfortunately, they were not followed by all public servants.
But correct me if I'm wrong, Minister, but there's no rule against charging a commission and doing absolutely no work for that commission. If you're gonna get a government contract, you're a company, you get a government contract, you subcontract that work to someone else and charge 15%. The Canadian public gets very little value for that 15%. Tell me if there's a rule in the government of Canada that prevents that from happening.
Two important points that you mentioned. First, the process. Second, the value. The process has to be open, fair, and transparent, and that's part of this team's job to make sure that this is the case in all contracts, including in emergency contracts, as was the case during COVID-19. The second piece is value for money. Now, value for money is to be assessed by what we call client departments. As in this case, it was CBSA. CBSA had to decide whether it thought it was value for money to invest in that particular contract in the context of the COVID-19 emergency. They thought that the emergency, the speed, the complexity of the work that they faced deserved a contract of that sort. Now, there were rules that had to be followed. They knew these rules. The rules were clearly stated. Unfortunately, some of them, yes, a small number of them, some of them didn't follow those rules, and you know the outcomes.
I didn't hear an answer to the question.
Yeah.
The question was very simple. Is there a rule? Does the government of Canada have a rule against charging commissions and not doing any work for the commissions? Like, we're talking about the evidence before the committees of Parliament has shown that it can be 15, 30%, and there can be several layers. So you can get to a point where the government of Canada is contracting something out, and only half of the actual monetary value is going towards doing actual work. The Canadian public should be horrified that this is happening. The governor, or the Auditor General rather, very clearly in her report said that your government overpaid for the ArriveCan app. I'm not sensing any sort of like contrition or embarrassment or sense that this is wrong. I asked you if you agreed that it sucks for Canada, and you didn't answer. Does it suck for Canada that we're wasting money on these apps and contracts for companies that do little or no work? I think it does.
Well, the best answer comes indeed from the Auditor General, who said very clearly that there wasn't enough value for money in the work that was done by GC Strategy. She said that many weeks ago, and she's correct. She pointed to the fact that had that job been done within the federal public service, it would have cost about 50% less. Now, whether that would have been possible is
Sorry,
something
that
different,
is
but
our time.
she did indeed
Minister,
point
I'm trying
to
to
a
get you
lack
out of
of
here
value
on
for
time,
money.
so I have to cut you off.